You know, there's a lot of people who want to have conversations about climate change. I think the climate change can start here in this room in November when we vote a new Congress into office. Thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you as well to CCU, Senator Armstrong, John Andrews, and the many students who have made this possible. Let's give them a round of applause. This has been fantastic. You know, my wife Jamie and I have been campaigning throughout the 4th Congressional District now for a little over a year. It's a district that has 40,000 more Republican voters than Democrats. It's the district that gave rise to Hank Brown, Wayne Allard, Bob Schaefer, and Marilyn Musgrave, a seat that's ranked the number 9 seat in the country, most likely to change parties. This year we have an unbelievable opportunity to take it back, but I want to share a story with you. Last night as I was listening to Dennis Prager, I couldn't help but think of our 6-year-old daughter. If you go to my hometown of Yuma, Colorado, way out on the Eastern Plains, go to 2nd Avenue and Main Street, you'll see a little chunk of concrete. On that chunk of concrete it says J.A.S. and Son, 1910. That's the business place of my great-great-granddad, who started that business over 100 years ago. It's still there, still a part of our family. But when my wife and I go for a walk with our daughter, and we walk across that concrete block, I can't help but wonder, will our daughter have the same kinds of opportunities, the same kinds of chances to build success for her family that we have enjoyed? Will she be able to move her family in the same fashion that her great-great-great-granddad did, to build a better life? If we continue in the direction that this country is continuing in, the answer is no. But if we in this room stand up together in November and fight for our liberties and fight for our rights to get back to this country to what it was founded on, we indeed will give that opportunity to her and every child like her, and we can get it done now. The fight for the 4th Congressional District won't be easy, but it can be won. My opponent has voted for the 4 horsemen of liberal politics. She voted for cap and trade. She voted for the stimulus bill. She voted for the health care bill. And she co-sponsored Card Check. We are going to win this race in November of 2010, and we're going to get it done in this room and across the state of Colorado and build majorities that take our country back. Which is a great segue to introduce Mr. Dick Morris to you today. Nobody knows the front lines of this fight better than Dick Morris, and I do want to start with an embarrassing story. A couple of weeks ago, I got an email from somebody named Dick Morris. Dick Morris doesn't email people in Yuma, Colorado. I knew it was some imposter trying to get me to respond back and get me in trouble, so I deleted the email. A couple of days later, this imposter named Dick Morris wrote to me again. I quickly and promptly did what my campaign manager suggested, delete the email. A few days later, John Andrews gave me a call and said, "Corey, Dick Morris is trying to get a hold of you." Well, he really needs no introduction, but for those of you who watch MSNBC like John Andrews, Dick Morris serves as a political analyst for Fox News Channel, is the author of many best-selling books, is a commentator in newspapers around the country, has a standing column in The Hill, a Washington-based newspaper that covers congressional politics, and Time Magazine actually called him the most influential private citizen in the United States. And I deleted his email. But I want to share with you one excerpt from his writings because I think it means a lot and sends a great message about what we'll be talking today. Excerpt begins, Barack Obama faces about the same problems that Bill Clinton faced in 1994 when he lost control of Congress. In both cases, the Democratic presidents had alienated moderate and conservative voters and found themselves increasingly isolated. In each instant, the president worried that off-year election turnout among their base would be attenuated, both because it always is in non-presidential years and because of their policy failings that had reduced enthusiasm that they had found amongst their base voters. And both men found themselves forced to escalate their rhetoric and to move their ideological positions to the left in order to try to drum up the kind of turnout that they needed to keep power in Congress. Mr. Morris concluded, "Clinton failed and Obama will too." In one of his latest books titled Catastrophe: How Obama, Congress, and the Special Interests Are Transforming a Slump into a Crash, Freedom into Socialism, and a Disaster into Catastrophe, and How to Fight Back. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no better way to begin our discussion today to end this wonderful conference. How to Fight Back with Mr. Dick Morris. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Well, thank you. You know, sorry I got snowed out the last time I was supposed to come out here, or weathered out, or rained out, or whatever, but I spoke to you by video, and if I knew I'd get a reception like that, I would have walked here. I want to just briefly pay tribute to two people that are in the audience. One is Frank Gaffney, who you heard before. Frank's organization really has been the epicenter of the effort to keep our country safe from terrorism and to stop Iran from developing nuclear weapons and to stop Sharia law from taking over our jurisprudence. And his group, Center for Security Policy.org, needs money. So please send it. He's too shy to ask, but I'm not on his behalf. The other is a bit of a more personal thank you to Senator Bill Armstrong. Not for politics. You know all about that. But I don't talk about this in public. I don't do it on television, and because I don't ever want there to be any doubt in my mind that my motivation was sincere rather than opportunistic. But it was Bill Armstrong who introduced me to Jesus Christ. I remember once we had lunch together. We were working for Terry Considine, a marvelous person. And we were having lunch, I think, or dinner together. And I said, you know, you are only the second man I have ever met. At the time, Mike Huckabee was the first, who I regarded as really smart, who believed in God. And I sort of said, how could you? And then began my religious education. And then after my scandal, which God sent me to make me a better person, first thing that arrived when I got back to my home was a copy of Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, sent by Senator Armstrong. And I then, you know, when I was more secular, I'd read every Agatha Christie book. Well, now I read every C.S. Lewis book. And I was baptized as a Christian in December of 1997. So when people say you switched parties, I always say to myself or under my breath, hey, you don't know the half of it. Switching parties was easy. Although the other day I was at Yankee Stadium and some guy had a Red Sox hat on. And I said, he came over and said hi to me. And I said, hey man, if I can switch parties, you can switch teams. Look, this is absolutely, everybody always says this is the most crucial election in our lifetime and this is a crossroads. And most of the time it's not true. This time, it is completely and totally true. I'll give it to you just as a statistic. To me, socialism is not an epithet or even a philosophy. It's a statistic. The statistic is what % of the economy is controlled by the government, okay? And in the United States, when Reagan took office, it was 37, and he brought it down to 30, 20 federal, 10 state and local. And it has remained at 30 straight throughout the last 30 years since Reagan brought it down in 1981 and 82. Well, under Obama, it is now 38, and when health care is fully implemented, it's going to be 40 plus. Obama has a unique way of increasing that stat. He not only grows the numerator, he shrinks the denominator. He shrinks our economy as he raises spending, so the percentage goes up both ways. I explained that for the math challenged among you. And really, when health care is fully implemented, it's going to be up in the low 40s. Now, Britain is at 40, France is at 48, Germany is at 47, Sweden is at 51. So if we lock in those changes, that is to say, we bring the taxes up to the level of spending, as opposed to the spending down to the level of taxes, these changes are going to be permanent. But if we are successful in electing a Republican Congress, and we bring the spending down to the level of taxes, we will succeed in reversing the drift to socialism of Barack Obama. Now, there are some who say the clock doesn't work backwards. It doesn't go that way. Once it's in place, you can't change it. But that's not true. In 1981, the people of France elected François Mitterrand as their president, and he nationalized everything, everything. And the economy fell apart, capital fled to Reagan's America and Thatcher's Britain, and 2 years later, our old friend Jacques Chirac, who at least in economics was a conservative, took office and denationalized everything. And it certainly can be done and will be done if we have a Republican Congress. Now, no sooner do I make a profession of faith than I screw it all up with a good joke. But this is one that I can't say on Fox, but it's a true story and highly pertinent to our times. You know, Churchill was defeated for re-election in 1945 in Britain because of right after he'd won the war. And Clement Attlee, the socialist, head of the Labour Party, took over. And Attlee nationalized everything and really started Britain on a socialist path that it took Thatcher to rescue her from. So in 1946, when he was the leader of the opposition, Churchill was in the men's room at the House of Commons. And he's standing there at a urinal, and in walks Clement Attlee. So Churchill goes down 3 urinals, and Attlee says, "Shy, Winston?" And Churchill looks back and says, true story, "No, it is not that at all. It is just that whenever you see anything that is big and impressive, you nationalize it." Guy can't be too safe. But seriously, this absorption of our economy, this takeover of the automobile industry, the takeover of the financial industry, don't be deceived that he doesn't own each of these banks. He owns them. And the Financial Regulation Bill gives the Secretary of the Treasury the power anytime he wants to take over any institution he wants, because he could claim it's too big to fail and it's at risk of insolvency. And this takeover of the manufacturing and utility industries, which is all that cap and trade is. You know, there are those who feel global warming is happening and there are those who feel it is not. I'm an agnostic on that because I'm not a scientist. But I will tell you something. Under the Kyoto Accords, and again under the Copenhagen goals, the United States is obliged to fulfill Obama's commitment that we will reduce our carbon emissions from 6,000 million metric tons a year to 5,000 by 2017. From 6,000 to 5,000. 6,000 is the level it was at in '05. You know what it is now? 5,400. We're more than half the way toward achieving that goal without taxes, without regulation, without the intervention of the Interior Department or EPA, without any of those coercive measures. We'll get to that level. Obama's real climate change policy is a recession that's stopping us from burning as much carbon as we used to. And the point is that we will achieve those goals the way any enlightened citizenry does, by learning about a problem and taking individual voluntary action to deal with it. But Obama wants to use this crisis, Rahm Emanuel said, never let a good crisis go to waste, to control the manufacturing and the utility sectors of the American economy. Because if you can control what they burn, you can control the business. And that is his goal, and it's got nothing to do with climate change or carbon emissions. We may be the only country in the world that meets the carbon emission standards. So when you look at the financial sector, the automobile sector, the utility sector, the manufacturing sector, and then you come to the healthcare sector, where what Obama is doing really is taking over the healthcare system of this country. Now, in the United Kingdom, where they have national health insurance, there is a consensus policy that has been written about and published and more or less agreed to by everybody, that they will not spend more than £50,000, about $75,000, in 1 year to save a patient's life. If the medication or the surgery costs more than that, if it's a 40-year-old, yeah, they'll do it. A 50-year-old, they'll do it. A 60-year-old, maybe not. A 70-year-old, probably not. And an 80 or a 90-year-old, no way. Now, we may disagree about when life begins, conception, viability, or birth, but we sure can all agree it ends at death. And to me, the ultimate pro-life cause of our time is to permit people to die when they die, not when the government decides to kill them. That's what pro-life is. And I speak with a certain amount of emotion about that because my father, who is 2.5 months shy of his 100th birthday, is in the critical care surgical ICU at Mount Sinai Hospital this morning, having been admitted a week ago and having faced life-threatening surgery, which he got through, survived. Every day they've told us he's going to die, and every day his numbers get better and better, and he now is on the verge of a recovery. And it reminds me of a great poem that runs in my family. Brown is dead, the doctor said. Brown jumped up, I'm strong. You lay down, said Mrs. Brown. The doctor can't be wrong. But now it's the government bureaucrat that can't be wrong, who's never met the person, who doesn't share in any of the life decisions, but who's going to be making that critical decision nonetheless. And if I look back on the last 4 years since my father had a colostomy and saved his life again at 95, and I look back at the 4 years that I've had with him, he didn't make any money. He didn't contribute to the economy. He didn't do any of that. But boy, this was an opportunity for me to get to know him and get to bond with him in a way that I never would have been possible without that. And I'm very glad that there was no bureaucrat to tell me no. So 50,000 pounds a year. Well, there's a drug called Avastin, which deals with colon cancer. That costs $60,000 a year. Canada won't let you have it. And as a result, Canada has a death rate of colon cancer of 41% of those who get it, whereas the US has a death rate of 32% of those who get it. And Canada won't let you have a colonoscopy whenever you want. There's an 8-month wait for it in most places. And as a result, Canada has a 25% higher incidence of colon cancer in the first place. And that is the kind of medical care that will be in place in this country if Barack Obama is allowed to control Congress for 2 more years. Now, what can we do about it? How can we stop it? Very simple. You know Elton John's song, Too Low for Zero? Well, we can zero fund stuff. We can take that whole budget, all of those agencies he's creating, all of those czars, all of those administrators. By the way, you know why Romanoff didn't take the job? They offered him the wrong job. The guy's name's Romanoff. Make him a czar. Zero fund those agencies. They can have the office because the feds own it. They can have the desk because it's their property of the GAO. But no outgoing phone service, I'm afraid. Zero fund it. And that is going to be the real challenge that we face in 2011. You look at what's going on in Greece now. That is just an early harbinger of what we are going to face here in the United States. Let me explain how it came about, okay? Let's say that I go to the Bill Armstrong National Bank. And I say, Mr. Armstrong, do you happen to have any mortgage-backed securities in your vault? And he says, mortgage-backed securities? My God, I'm drowning in them. I'm wallpapering my bank with them. They're worthless. They're underwater. The mortgage is worth more than the house is worth at this point. They're non-performing. Nobody's making payments, and I'm stuck with this worthless wallpaper. What about it? I'll say, well, I'm the Federal Reserve Board, and I'd like to buy your mortgage-backed securities for $100 million. He says, 100 million? Yes. Go ahead. Write the check. And I do. I give him $100 million. There's no money in the account, but don't worry, I'm the Federal Reserve Board. That's how I now have created $100 million of additional currency. And Bill has that $100 million in his vault in cash now, can do whatever he wants with it. So being a responsible Coloradan, he goes to this gentleman here who wants a new housing development built, and that one there wants to expand his factory, and that woman over there wants to grow her company, and this gentleman here wants to buy a new house, and those people over there want car loans and all that, and he pencils in those commitments to create jobs in Colorado. Then this guy from the Treasury comes along right behind me and says, Mr. Armstrong, what are you planning to do with the $100 million? And Armstrong says, well, I've made all of these people who I think are creditworthy, I'm going to give them loans. And the guy from the Treasury says, congratulations, that's terrific. It's wonderful to see this money being put to use, creating jobs as part of our heroic stimulus package. Are you sure they're all going to pay you back? And he says, well, I think so. You sure? Well, I guess. Because if they don't, I have to fire you, take over your bank, replace the board of directors, liquidate your stockholder equity, and put you out of a job and your company and your bank out of business. But as long as you're sure they'll all pay you back, that's not a problem, is it? So Bill says, well, I'm not that sure they'll all pay back. Well, I have a solution for you. Why don't you buy Treasury bonds instead? Don't lend any of these people money. I'm a little short this quarter. Give it me the $100 million. And Bill says, at what interest rate? And I say, 3.5. And he said, well, I got it for free from this moron that bought my stupid mortgage-backed securities. Yeah, 3.5 point spread's pretty good. And the result is that I take that money that could be used to create jobs and it pays for the deficit. Now, right now, 3.5% is a pretty good rate. And we owe $14 trillion at an average of 3.5%. By the way, just to get a feel for that number, from the day George Washington took the oath of office until the day Barack Obama took the oath of office, the national debt of the United States rose to $9 trillion. And in the last 19 months, it's risen by $5 trillion more. That's the magnitude of what this man has done to us. But 14 trillion at 3.5% interest, that's about 400 billion. Not too bad. The budget's 4 trillion. Social Security's 550, defense is 550. Social Security's 400, Medicare's 300, Medicaid's 200, 400's not that bad. But now the Fed has stopped buying those mortgage-backed securities after printing $1.4 trillion of cash based on those purchases. Before they started, our money supply in the United States was 800 billion. Now it's over 2 trillion because of this mortgage-backed security nonsense. But now at last they've realized they have to stop. So now I'm going to have to borrow real money from real people at real interest rates, like China and Japan, and real lenders in the United States, not phony setup deals like that. And I'll have to pay 6 or 7 or 8%. And that debt service isn't going to be 400 billion. It's going to be 1 trillion or more. And that is a totally unsustainable level of debt service for the United States. A quarter of our whole budget just to repay the amount we owe on the debt. And the lenders who give us money are going to wise up pretty quickly. They're going to see that we're no better than Greece. They're going to see that our deficit and our debt are unsustainable. And there will be enormous pressure on Washington to close that budget deficit. Any way you can. Tax more, spend less, do whatever you can do to close down that deficit. And the international markets will haunt Congress demanding it. There may even be a bondholders' strike where they refuse to lend the government any more money, and Social Security checks and stuff don't go out. Well, those will go out. That's the trust fund. But Medicaid payments won't be made and stuff like that. And that could happen. That will happen. And then our congressmen, our Republican senators and congressmen, are going to come under unbelievable pressure. Obama's going to say, I'm a moderate. I'm moving to the center. Half tax increases, half spending cuts. That's the moderate position. And the Republicans will say, no, we will not raise taxes. And then Obama will say, but you're being extreme. You're being way over crazy right wing. And the Republicans will say, correctly, that if you raise taxes, you're hurting the economy. You raise taxes to fund half of the deficit, you're going to decrease revenues, not increase them, because you'll slow economic growth and you'll push us deeper into recession. And that means less money coming in and more claims on your entitlements. And that won't close the deficit, it will add to the deficit and replace discretionary spending, which you're cutting, with entitlement spending, which you can't cut. And the Republicans will take that position, and the opinion leaders and the editorial boards and the New York Times will hoot them down and shout them down for being irresponsible. The only person that will agree with the Republicans in Congress is 75% of the American people. Who understand, in the latest poll, that cutting spending, not raising taxes, is the way to deal with the budget deficit. And to understand that there is only one tax which works, which generates revenue without hurting economic growth. And 71% support that tax. That tax is a tax cut. And you know, this isn't just rhetoric. When I worked with Bill Clinton, we would sit in the Oval Office for day after week after month working on cutting the budget to a level that would be okay in our negotiations with Gingrich and Lott. And after a long time, we came up with a formula. It was kind of incredible to watch Clinton because he knew every single line in the federal budget by heart, like 10,000 of them. And on a yellow pad, he would write the federal budget out. I might add that that photographic memory was applicable only to his public life. In the rest, he was positively an amnesiac. We interrupt this with a cute story, also true. I was very close to a woman named Betsy Wright, who was his chief of staff as governor of Arkansas. And Betsy, who the Lord did not favor with good looks, was rooming with a woman who was richly endowed with good looks. And she was with Clinton when he was governor in 91, 92, just running for president. And she came home to Betsy that night and she said, Bill stuck his finger in my face and said, I don't do this stuff. This is a smear. This is a right-wing Republican setup. This is all untrue. I don't know all of these women they're talking about. And Betsy's friend said to Betsy, Betsy told me, I got the impression he forgot that we'd slept together. Slipped his mind. Anyway, so we went with all these budget cuts over to Gingrich, and we signed a 7-year balanced budget deal. And in the course of it, Gingrich said, and Lott said, why don't we cut capital gains taxes too? And Hillary was opposed, but Bill was for it, and I worked hard with him, and we got it done, and we cut the cap gains rate from 28 down to 20. Money poured in. We drowned in revenue. We didn't balance that budget in 7 years. We balanced it in 17 months because of the revenue the decreased capital gains tax it gave us. So what's Obama doing? He's raising it from 15 up to 24 at the very least. That's 20 plus 4 for Medicare. And he'll probably raise it higher if he gets control of Congress, which will cut revenues. It won't add, it'll cut them. And when George Bush cut taxes on the top 1% of the country in 2001, that top 1% over 10 years generated $1 trillion in extra tax payments because they made more money at the lower tax rate. And in fact, increased their share of the total national tax payment from 37% to 40%, even though the rates had dropped. That's how you stimulate the economy. But when this pressure mounts, you're going to be able to tell the Republicans from the rhinos. You're going to be able to tell who are the people that will stand in there and say not a dime, not a penny, not a dollar of new taxes. From the ones that will say, well, I've always opposed increasing taxes and it's a last resort, but our backs are up against the wall and I see no alternative. That kind of squishiness can have no place in the Republican Party that takes Congress in 2011. No place. Too much at stake. Too important. So I don't get involved in primaries, and I don't know your candidates well enough to do that. But just beware. Beware to separate the Republicans from the rhinos, because it's going to come to pass at this session of Congress. Now, before that happens, something even more interesting is going to happen. The Greek debt crisis is going to spread to the states in the United States. California is going to become the new Greece in all things but culture. Sorry about that. And it's going to be under enormous pressure because people are just not going to lend the state any more money. And Michigan as well, New York State as well, not Jersey, where Chris Christie is holding the line. Not Arizona, where Jan Brewer is holding the line. But those other states are going to come to Obama and say, bail me out. They've already gotten 2 bailouts, and Congress just rejected a 3rd. And the Republicans in Congress, if we control it, are going to say no. In fact, I think they'll say, hell no. You guys got yourself into this mess, you're going to have to get yourself out. But then I believe that the Republicans should and will offer a solution to the problem, which is right now under federal bankruptcy law, there is no way a state can declare bankruptcy. Municipalities can, but the state can't. So what I think they're going to do, and I hope they do, and I'm pushing for, is to amend the federal bankruptcy law to create a procedure for state bankruptcies, which will permit the states, when they go into bankruptcy, to do what Delta has done and Chrysler has done, and abrogate the contracts to the teachers union, the public employee unions, the civil service union, the SSIU, and abrogate those contracts and start at ground zero. Take back our state and local governments. Break the power of that Democratic Party union connection that controls the state and local governments throughout the United States. And I believe that will be the first fight, the first real test of how many Republicans we have in Congress in 2011. Now, some of you are thinking, this guy used to be a Democrat, right? I used to be an atheist, too. Like C.S. Lewis said, I'm a lapsed atheist. But I was a conservative Democrat, okay? I was a Democrat who was way to the right of the rest of his party. I was a Democrat that helped Clinton balance the budget and reform the welfare law and increase the size of the police force in the country and put in a federal death penalty, all of these conservative measures. But there is no more such thing as a conservative Democrat. They are extinct. They are obsolete. I am a dodo bird. There is no more of me in this country. Betsy Markey is not a conservative Democrat. Ken Salazar is not a conservative Democrat. Ed Perlmutter is not a conservative Democrat. Michael Bennet is not a conservative Democrat. And Tsar Romanoff is not a conservative Democrat. And the point is that Americans have learned that lesson this year. The reason the Republicans will win Congress is not just cyclical. It's not just that it's an off year. It's not just that it's a recession. It's not just that Obama's ratings are terrible. It is that we have learned that we have been conned and fooled and had when Democrats tell us they're conservative. Because they say they're pro-life, they say they're pro-gun, they say they're anti-tax, and then they walk into Washington, and the first vote they cast is for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House of Representatives. And while they're doing it, Charlie Rangel to write our tax law when he doesn't even pay him. Henry Waxman, the most extreme environmentalist, to set up our energy and environment policy. Dingell to run our transportation policy. And the worst of all, Barney Frank to run our banking policy. So how can you vote that slate and still say you're a conservative? Look, I was really impressed with Corey's speech and with Ryan's speech. But I got to tell you something. People that say they vote for the man, not the party, used to be pretty smart. Now they're just totally stupid. It's like saying, I don't vote for the president, I vote for the member of the Electoral College. Because you're voting for a Democrat who is going to elect leadership that will be so liberal that it won't matter how he votes or she votes. That vote, I mean, if they don't have the votes, they deem it passed anyway. So it is absolutely crucial that we act to win the elections. This state is the epicenter. This state, for once, does not have to sit back and watch it while other states are the key ones in the election. This is the state. We cannot win the Senate without winning the seat in Colorado. Cannot. Numbers don't work. We cannot win the House without defeating Betsy Markey. We cannot recapture the House without saying goodbye to John Salazar. These are the crucial races. So if you live in those districts, great. Give your Republican candidate who wins the primary money and support and your time. Go door to door. Set up an email list in my book, 2010, that's on sale back there. I'll sign them. I explain how to do it. Set up your own electronic precinct. Become like a Tammany ward healer, but online. And go out and line up that vote. And if you don't live in one of those districts, adopt a district. Adopt a poor, deserving Democrat and send him home to be with his family. Give the Republican money and get in your car on weekends and go to the district and volunteer and work there until the election is over. And in your own community, work on the Senate race that is statewide in Colorado. Colorado has the capacity to change 3 Democratic congressmen and 1 Democratic senator, and we only need 40 in the country and 11 in the Senate. Now, the 11 in the Senate look pretty good. We have 4 races where we're way ahead. North Dakota, the former Republican chairman is here. Good for you. North Dakota, Delaware, Indiana, and Arkansas. I'm so happy Blanche Lincoln won that primary. I would not delegate to anyone the joy of defeating her. And next week, I'm going to spend 3 days in Arkansas working on just that. You know, I know the state pretty well. So we're way ahead in those 4. And Arkansas has 3 congressional seats we're going to pick up, too, out of the 4. 4th we already have. And then you come to the races that could go either way. There are 7 of them. Illinois, where Mark Kirk is tied with Janulius, the Democratic state treasurer, who got elected state treasurer on the strength of his credentials of running his family bank for 30 years. The same bank the FDIC raided 6 weeks ago and closed because it made a $32 million loan to mobsters. And these weren't mobsters in disguise. This was under their own name, and they were under indictment at the time they got the loan. You've heard of the Witness Protection Program. This is the way the other one works. And then we have Pennsylvania, where Pat Toomey is about 7 or 8 ahead of Joe Sestak, and that's borderline getting to one which we can really put in the bag. That's 2. We have Colorado, where either Republican leads either Democrat in all of the polls. And then we come to Harry Reid. Now, I got to tell you all, Harry Reid put on a negative ad against Sharon Angle, who won the primary, the day after that primary that was a devastating, devastating negative ad. Sharon was giving a speech, and she said, and I'm quoting her now, "We have to phase out Social Security and Medicare funding as we now do it and replace it with a personalized lockbox that Congress can't raid so that Social Security and Medicare are always available." Well, Harry edited it after the word Medicare. So it said, we have to phase out Social Security and Medicare. And he put that ad on, and he's put $1 million behind it. And so far, you know Churchill's other line, he said, the lie makes it halfway around the world before the truth puts its shoes on in the morning. And I've been very active in raising money for a political action committee that is spending money on a rebuttal ad that puts the full quote on television, the full quote of Sharon Angle, and makes the point that she was trying to stop Harry Reid from raiding the money, rather than in any way phasing it out. She was strengthening it, not weakening it. But we have only about $200,000 behind it so far, and he has over $1 million behind his attack. So let me give you the address of our PAC, and go online. It's called Americans for New Leadership. AmericansForNewLeadership.org. AmericansForNewLeadership.org, and send Sharon Angle some money so that we can answer that. And by the way, while you're at it, go to dickmorris.com, enter your e-address, and then I will send you all these mailings with requests to intervene at crucial points in crucial districts throughout the country, because I'm really on top of each of them. I plan to campaign in 45 House districts over the course of this year and do what I can. So those are the stakes. Is it our country or isn't it? Is it going to be free enterprise or not? Is it going to follow the European model of stagnation, increasing secularization, increasing self-involvement and lower birth rates, increasing government spending and attenuation of any kind of ability to create jobs? Are we going to, in Europe, in the European Union, outside of Great Britain, has not created one single net new job since 1980? And the U.S. has created 30 million of them? Which system are we going to follow? Will we follow Barack Obama into the economic grave, or will we survive as a free country? Those are the stakes. Questions?
What a climax. What a crowning message. What a call to action. I think he got your attention. Dick Morris, we want to send a message to your dad, soon to be the centenarian. Give him our love, give him our good wishes, and just selfishly for the Western Conservative Summit, give him our warm thanks for rallying this week so that you could be here. Let's take some questions, and there are a few of you who have also expressed the desire to just offer a comment or a challenge to your fellow summiteers as we conclude. And so the roving mics will come to you, and folks, take your turn. Susan? Over here. Let's start with this lady right here. I think it's more of a comment than a question, but one we need to hear.
Can everyone hear me? My name is Sandy Ledoux. My husband and I are here from Arvada, and we've been hearing questions all weekend long about what can we do? What can we really do? And how do we need to approach this? And I had a couple of ideas this morning that I just felt were really worth sharing with all of you. And I wrote it down so I won't mess it up. And it really just reiterates what Mr. Morris has shared with us, what Michelle Bachmann shared with us. But I really saw this as a national emergency. It's a national emergency, and we need to become campaigners, as though we are campaigning our hearts and lives out in the next several months to overcome what's happening in our country. It has to be a top priority, personally, to every one of us, in every way that we possibly can think of, in order to truly turn the tide. We must inform as many people as possible, especially those who need to understand what's really going on here. There are so many people in our country that don't really understand how critical and what a crisis this really is, what is really happening in our country. We need to let people know this is not a political battle. Actually, this is a last-ditch effort to rescue our country from utter disaster.
If I may just follow that up for one moment. As I said, I'll be signing books after this, and in my book 2010, Take Back America, my wife and I have a section, Form Your Own Electronic Precinct. Everybody here has to realize you are a publisher. You are the center of concentric circles that go out from you, that overlap with other concentric circles, and ultimately create a vast electronic precinct that you can access. Make a list of everybody you know, the Parents Association, the church group, your high school classmates, your college classmates, your clients, your work associates, your extended family, everybody you know, and put them on an email list and work them. Send them clips, send them videos, send them arguments. Go on my website, you get my columns, send them all over the place. No copyright problem there. And really become the center of your own electronic precinct. If I can quote Bobby Kennedy, when anyone throws a rock into the lake to protest injustice and to speak out for the rights of man, he sends concentric circles of ripples out from that rock. And when those circles interact with other circles from other rocks that were cast into that lake, they form a mighty wave that can sweep down the highest and toughest barriers of oppression.
Dick, I'm concerned about this national popular vote initiative that originated out in California. Would you comment on the likelihood of it gaining traction and what the consequences would be if it does get through?
You're speaking there about the one where each electoral vote votes separately, in effect? Each congressional district votes separately?
Where the states form a compact to vote with the national popular vote in order to get 270 electoral votes, regardless of what the individual states voted popular vote.
I wouldn't sit up at night and worry about that. The partisanship here in the country is so deep and so entrenched, and the issues so significant that this election in 2012 will not be close enough for anything of that sort of shenanigan to influence it. We are either going to win or we're going to lose. It will either be transparently obvious that Barack Obama is terrible and it's not working and everything is going down, or it won't be. And I think that the key to that is whether we can pose the issues that will dominate the 2012 election in the 2011 legislative cycle. We're going to have a government shutdown, just like you had in '95 and '96. But this time we're going to be with a position that the people strongly support. This time we're going to use that to shape the issues to go into the 2012 election, knowing just what we're doing. And for whatever it counts, I'll be fighting on your team this time.
Okay, Dick, I'm wondering if one of the issues is finally to deal with our IRS income tax, flat tax, fair tax, whatever. Is this one of the issues we can do?
Yeah, look, first of all, I really believe that the flat tax is something we could absolutely do. I think the key to getting that passed is to make it voluntary. If you try to make the flat tax mandatory, every mortgage deduction company, every homeowner, every state and local taxpayer goes crazy and says, I can't deduct my state and local taxes or my mortgages, and they don't understand that they'd probably make out better with a flat tax rate. But if you say you could either file under the flat tax or under the existing system, everybody will quickly realize the difference is relatively minor, and getting the IRS off your back is relatively major. That you don't have to tell anyone how much money you make or any of that stuff, that you get your privacy back. And I believe that you could set that up very easily. And people would then vote in effect with their computers and move over to the flat tax. The fair tax, however, is a trap. Obama is going to be for the fair tax. That's the tax he's going to push in 2011, the value-added tax they have in Europe. And he's not going to get to the fine print in Neil Bortz's wonderful book, which say that we're going to repeal the 17th Amendment and we're going to have no income tax, but instead of VAT. He's not going to get to that part. But he will look at the idea of keeping the tax secret like it is in Europe. The reason Europe is so damn liberal is they don't know how much they're paying in taxes. They go and they buy something and they don't realize that 25% of what they're paying is a tax. And Obama wants to restore that here. So let's hold in abeyance the fair tax sentiment, as worthy as it is, until we get through this current battle with Barack Obama so he doesn't use it to roll up our flank.
Dick, would you be kind enough to comment on the government's rumored desire to nationalize and or seize 401ks?
Rumored. I think Obama will settle for devaluing them. So there's not much left to fight for. And I think that obviously one of the big fights in the future is going to be whether Social Security can be more along the lines of 401ks, treating us like adults who can invest our own money. But I do want to warn the Republican Party. The time to mess with Social Security, the time to mess with Medicare is not now. Now it is time to repeal the Obama stimulus package, get rid of that horrific deficit spending, cut down that discretionary spending, maybe cut Medicaid. That would work, lowering the income threshold for Medicaid, cutting a whole range of programs. But to win this fight that's coming up in 2011, we have to be hands off Medicare and Social Security. It is not time to take those on. And you can balance the budget over a period of time without that, particularly if you use tax cuts to stimulate your economy. Having just won a fight on public opinion against cutting Medicare by $500 billion, we can't now propose Medicare cuts to balance the budget. Hey. Oh, thank you.
Fans. I'm going to ask you what...
She just said she was honored and privileged to meet me. I want to be sure you all heard that.
He's my favorite guy, and I want to hear everything you have to say, unlike O'Reilly, so please take your time whenever you need to answer.
O'Reilly every Wednesday, Hannity every Monday, by the way.
But I'm going to ask the question that bothers me the most, that I ask my husband all the time, and he never really has a satisfactory answer for me. So how realistic is it if we do, in fact, win majorities that we need to in the presidency to actually repeal Obamacare? I mean, is that wishful thinking, or can this actually happen?
Absolutely realistic. First thing we do is we zero fund it in the budget that we're going to pass. That's going to cause a government shutdown just by itself. But we zero fund it and we stop it from being implemented. Then the second thing we do is that the Medicare cuts that are in Obamacare have to be approved by Congress each year. We say no. We veto those cuts. And then effectively it's repealed, or at least frozen, until we can take the White House, because we'll never have override ability. And then I believe we will repeal it. Now, when we repeal it, we have to be sensible about it. I think the United States needs a comprehensive system of catastrophic health insurance with government funding for those who can't afford it. Not controlling the medical care system, not telling you how to do it any more than the assigned risk pool controls the automobile insurance industry. You take people that can't afford it and you put it together and you make it work. I completely agree that we should not let insurance companies raise premiums when people get sick or terminate the coverage when they get sick, and that they should be forced to take all comers. And that will result in some premium increases, and that's something that we owe to our fellow citizens. But don't use that real legitimate need as an excuse to cut Medicare and deny health care to the American people through health care rationing. And also, when we do that, expand the number of doctors. Don't contract them by cutting their reimbursement rate. Expand them. Offer repayment of student loans. Increase the number of medical schools. When Harry Truman first proposed compulsory health insurance in 1947, Title II of that bill was a vast expansion in medical education. You can't expand the demand without expanding the supply. And let's get rid of one other shibboleth. This ridiculous notion that we're going to cut health care costs in the United States. Yeah? The US population in the next 10 years is going to rise by 9%. And the number of people over 65 is going to rise by 61%. You're going to cut health care costs? Are you kidding me? Come on. One of the nice things about living in the richest country in the world is that we can afford to help people live longer. We can afford to cure diseases others can't, and we should not let rationing or socialism or artificial scarcity or a desire to limit medical incomes get in the way of that.
Thank you, Dick, for your presentation. Is this on? Thank you very much for your presentation today. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
I think everybody in this room knows that part of the solution is the cutting of spending. Cutting of spending. But if we go to the next step, and assuming that we're able to make a difference in our Congress, that we take back our Congress, there is going to be some pain involved in that. And I was wondering if we have the leadership ready to go to tell the American people that we need a new national resolve, much as the way we prepare for war, where we have a national resolve that there's sacrifice involved to make this work for America, and that we can't just have hundreds of thousands of federal workers protesting and all kinds of entitlement people protesting because they no longer can have what they've had in the past.
Yeah, I reject the notion that this is going to be painful. I think it's going to be fun. I look forward to telling the teachers of America, you got to contribute to your pension like everybody else does. I look forward to telling the federal employees, you've got to do a copay on your health insurance like everybody else does. I look forward to telling Harry Reid, your $18 million bridge to your own property that has increased your values of your property from $150,000 to $2.1 million ain't going to be built. You know, before you cut muscle, before you cut nerve, you cut muscle. Before you cut muscle, you cut plasma. But before you cut any of that, you cut fat. And Obama has given us plenty to cut.
My point was that we need the nature of a Ronald Reagan to make that happen for the national resolve, and I just hope that we have that. And I think we can. Well,
now you're getting into something else. I want to tell everybody that we have a great range of second-tier candidates who could step up and be good nominees in 2012. They're terrific. They're great people. And I think Sarah Palin is terrific. I think without Sarah Palin, McCain would not have had a 3-week lead in the election. No VP has ever given the presidential candidate a lead. She did for 3 weeks. But I do feel that beating Obama is going to be very tough. And I think the media has, in its sexist, horrific coverage of Palin, done her such a disservice that it may be irremediable in the context of a presidential race. I love Mike Huckabee to death, but I don't think he's going to run. And I believe that Mitt Romney sponsored the same kind of health care in Massachusetts I've been fighting like hell against throughout the United States. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if he's going to run. I hope he does. I'm for Newt Gingrich for President of the United States of America.
I'd like to hope that we get a news story out of the concluding summit session that says Morris tees up 2012 presidential race. But this brings me to taking the chairman's prerogative of posing the last question to Dick Morris around the subject of media. Dick, we love you on Fox, And I'm on that email distribution of your column, and I'm glad that there are outlets like The Hill and the New York Post that publish it. But just something as simple as getting the word out about this summit. You folks have told me all weekend that you wished we had a bigger megaphone, and we've had to do it through what he calls the electronic precinct because we don't have much media access. So my question to you, Dick, 10 years from now, where are we in America with media? Are we in an America where the Fairness Doctrine has shut down conservative radio, an America where the FCC chokeholds the internet, which is now free as it should be, an America where we have government-subsidized bailouts of dying newspapers and the control of them? Or are we in America with more free diversity of media where the system of representative government has a chance to work, and where you are still on Fox?
I'm glad you asked the question about 10 years from now. I believe that we can stop the harms you're speaking of with a Republican-controlled Congress. And it's particularly important, the one you mentioned, about government subsidy to the news media. Leibowitz, the head of the FCC under Obama, is pushing a proposal to subsidize the news media by special tax status and write-offs and all that. And we all know Obama's style. The left hand offers subsidy and the right hand offers regulation. And we can't let that happen to the press and the media in the United States. But 10 years from now, we will each be our own media centers. We will each be our own publisher. You mentioned the Post and the Hill. Well, I write once a week for the Hill, but I write 5 columns a week. And the Post takes my stuff occasionally. I'm a little too strident for them sometimes. But I don't care. I have 435,000 people signed up on my email list who get my columns almost every single day. And they're the people who I want to reach. I'll reach more by my own publication through the email than I ever would through any publication made out of dead trees. So my feeling is that what's happening and what's going to happen more and more is the atomization of our media, that you're going to have more and more outlets. Every website will be its own TV station. Nobody is going to be watching the same channel twice as anybody else in the country. You're going to have small audiences for each of many, 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 many organs that will really have no way that they can be controlled, not by the US government, not by the Chinese government. And you're going to have a birth of freedom in the press because its atomization will defy regulation. And that process has to begin by each of you publishing your own newspaper between now and November in what I've called your own electronic precinct. Get used to it. That's what the world is going to be about. That's the lesson the left learned with MoveOn.org and Acorn, and it's the lesson we're going to learn this year. Thank you.
Bravo. Absolutely. Thanks a million. Dick Morris, what a hero, what a voice.